Okay, let's dive into this. We all think we know the word sustainability, right? It's everywhere, on our coffee cups, in corporate reports, political speeches. It feels pretty straightforward, something we should all be working towards. But what if that common understanding is just scratching the surface of something way more complex, way more challenging?
So this is the classic definition, the one most of us learn. It comes from the 1987 Brundtland Report for the UN. And you gotta admit, it's elegant, it's moral, and it really boils down to a simple goal. Don't be selfish. Think about the future. This one sentence is pretty much the starting point for every modern conversation on the topic.
On the surface, that seems simple enough. But here's the thought. What if sustainability isn't a straightforward engineering challenge, like building a bridge? What if it's a fundamentally different type of challenge altogether? One that doesn't have a final solution in the way we usually think about it.
To really get to grips with sustainability, we actually have to borrow a concept from a completely different field, planning theory. The term is a wicked problem. And no, it's not about being morally evil, but about being devilishly complex and almost impossible to solve.
This term was coined by theorists Horst Rittel and Melvin Weber. See, they saw that problems like poverty or urban decay weren't like math problems with a single right answer. No, they're these tangled messes of social, economic, and ecological factors. And that description, man, it fits sustainability perfectly.
These traits really break down the wickedness. Just think about climate change for a second. There's no single true solution, only good or bad options with massive trade-offs. There's no finish line where we can just say, phew, we're done. And maybe most importantly, every major action we take, like a global energy transition, is a one-shot operation. We can't just hit undo if it goes wrong. The consequences are, for all intents and purposes, irreversible.
So, if there's no single solution, how do we even begin to act? Well, different groups have developed some really powerful frameworks for navigating this wickedness. Let's start with a perspective that reframes sustainability not as a technical issue, but as a fight for justice.
A really key perspective comes from the Barcelona School of Political Ecology, led by a thinker named Joan Martínez Alier. This school of thought completely reframes the entire debate. They argue that sustainability isn't just about ecology. It's fundamentally about justice. And that brings a critical, bottom-up view to the whole conversation.
Martínez Alier directly challenges a very common assumption that caring for the environment is a luxury for the wealthy. He just counters this with the concept of the environmentalism of the poor. He argues that for indigenous communities, for peasants, for marginalized groups all over the world, environmentalism isn't some abstract ideal. It's a literal fight for survival, defending their land, their water, and their resources from extraction and pollution.
So, how does this school of thought analyze these fights? One of their key tools is this concept called social metabolism. This forces us to look at an economy not just in terms of money, but in terms of its physical reality. The tons of minerals, the barrels of oil, and the cubic meters of water that are pulled from nature, used and then dumped back as waste. It makes the invisible flow of resources totally visible.
And when you track that physical flow, the consequence becomes starkly clear, a massive imbalance they call ecologically unequal exchange. As you can see here, materials flow from the south to the north, but the environmental burden, the pollution, the waste, the liabilities, it flows in the opposite direction. From this perspective, you simply cannot solve sustainability without addressing this fundamental inequality.
The justice framework is a really powerful modern critique, but it's not the only way to view our relationship with the planet. For a completely different perspective, we can look to an ancient, non-Western philosophical tradition that offers another path entirely.
Look at this stark contrast in worldviews. The dominant Western tradition, stemming from thinkers like René Descartes, saw nature as something to be conquered, a resource for humans to become its masters and possessors. But traditional Chinese thought, from Confucianism to Taoism, is built on this foundational idea of Chen Ren Shi Tao, a deep harmony between humans and the natural world. The goal isn't control, it's coordination and balance.
So we have the lens of justice, and we have the lens of harmony, both grappling with this wicked problem. How do we move forward when there's no single right answer, only these different, deeply held perspectives? Well, the answer may lie in how we approach complexity itself.
This is such a fundamental insight from complexity theory. When dealing with a wicked problem like sustainability, there is no objective, outside position. We can't stand apart and engineer a solution from a distance. Every single one of us, as a consumer, a citizen, a decision maker, we are inextricably part of the system we are trying to change.
So if we're all inside the problem, what do? We can't just impose a solution. Instead, maybe we need a new set of skills, ones focused on communication and learning. We can start with reflection, just understanding our own biases and assumptions. Then inquiry, genuinely trying to understand why others see the world so differently. And finally, advocacy, where we explain our own views clearly but, and this is the important part, remain open to having them challenged and changed. It's about dialogue, not debate.
Which brings us right back to the heart of the challenge. We now see sustainability not as a simple goal, but as a wicked problem, defined by complexity and competing values. The path forward isn't some single highway. It's a continuous process of navigating really difficult terrain together. So if every major step we take is a one-shot operation with irreversible consequences, the question for all of us is, how do we choose our next step?